I've had a lot of time to kind of just go through and do some mental inventory and say like, okay, I really like all these things, but what in my life have I not been putting attention to? And I noticed like what atrophies, and some of those things are actually still really important to me. So.
So let's talk about the book. Let's get into the book. So the book is called Don't Settle. I was gonna say I'm just gonna let you dive into it.
Yeah, the first book is called Don't Settle, Start Living a Life You Love, which seems very appropriate for your podcast. And I actually wrote that. Well, the story was I definitely knew I had a book in me, and I think I've known that for a long time, but I never actually thought, I don't know. I didn't know how I was going to actually get it out of me. And I ended up in 2014 running a Kickstarter campaign. I was on fire about it and I was all about it. And it was basically like, okay, if dance and writing had this love child, it would be this book. And the book was Live Your Dance. And that was the whole concept. And I was it was supposed to be a book about kind of dance and life and then my journey to the US Open that year, which I was doing with a different partner. And so I was raising money for the research and for the time and for the competition and the training and all that stuff. So it was awesome. I mean, I was able to generate 27,000 in 27 days and we got it going. And then when I sat down to really write this book, I realized it was not just one book. It was at least two. And so it was so much easier to just kind of like make that break from the get-go. And that's where Don't Settle came out of. And it was much more about like the beginning of the journey, the leaving the corporate, making that decision, which was a really hard decision. It was really filled with a lot of angst and, changing your path that much when I had an amazing opportunity in front of me and I was working with celebrity chefs and designing shoes and doing these things. And it was like, why would I ever say no to this great life, mountains, beach, company credit card, like just amazing experiences and sitting at the table with CEOs of billion-dollar corporations. Like it was crazy. And I realized that. And it was also crazy that I wasn't as happy. I was really not happy at all. And so anyway, it's my journey to kind of figure that out. And then also kind of a workbooky thing of like, okay, if you're at all in this process, in any version of it, and I go through different iterations, like here's some ideas to think about. Here's some journal prompts. Here are some other anecdotes to kind of potentially support you on your journey if that's helpful. So that was the first book, and it's more job focused. The Live Your Dance itself then became, like I was saying before we like went live, it's gone through many iterations. I think I've written at least 3 times and rewritten it and rewritten it. And at first it was just going to be my podcast because I have all these great interviews and like using the content and culling that and, really kind of coming through that to a succinct synthesis of all of it. But then again, that didn't feel right either. So it's been this very organic process, but I think I have it dialed in now and I'm about to release kind of an update of Don't Settle. So it'll be like the 2020 version. And then the next book, the Live Your Dance book, should be out soon. And that way also my Kickstarter backers, the whole project should be wrapping up soon. And I keep saying that, but I really actually feel it this way. The pandemic, ironically, it's been really hard in many ways, but it's also been very revealing. And I realize how much mental bandwidth I've been kind of allocating for this book. And it's really hard for me to take on new projects when so much of my mental processing power is being like used in the background all the time on that book. And it's like, if I could get that finished and close that program, all my other RAM could be used to process the other new projects. Like, I'm such a nerd, but that's how I feel about it. Like my mental allocation of where I'm putting my energy, it's time for that book to come forward. So I'm actually grateful for the opportunity to kind of minimize distractions and create that focus that I know needs to be there to create a quality. I have all that I need. It's just the time to put it together. So yeah, I'm making that happen and I'm really excited.
That's awesome. I am so excited for the book to come out because just from what we were talking about before we went live, I think that the concept that you're running with for this second book is, I don't know if I want to use the word inspiring or just like, it's a direction that I really haven't seen put to paper. I feel like it's something that I've had a lot of conversations with people in and out of the industry. And I feel like as a generation, like the millennial generation is having some of those conversations of like, what makes you a whole person? Like it's not going to be just getting the 401k and the job with the benefits and the vacation package and the corporate card and the corporate car. It's, you have to make sure that you are meeting all of your needs as a well-rounded individual. And that means finding time for family. That means finding time for hobbies, that's passion pursuits, that's like all of these different avenues and all of these. At the beginning, you mentioned like chunks of a wheel, right? Like pie pieces needing to get filled in. You need to find all of your little pie pieces and make sure that it's creating this overall experience so that at the end of the day, you feel fulfilled as a person. I look at like my parents' generation and their parents' generation, and I feel like, not that it was cookie cutter and not that everyone had kind of like this predetermined path for them, but it felt much more like the check marks that you were supposed to click as a person were, you know, you want a job that has a retirement package, that you're working full time. You want the, 2.5 kids, the dog, and the house. And if you do those two things, your life will be wonderful and fantastic. But I think now we're realizing like, no, it's all of those other pursuits in life that really make it a life worth living.
I totally agree though. I think if anything, for those who have the luxury of working from home during, I think it still creates a lot of opportunity for us to kind of evaluate what is really important. And when it's all stripped down and you're left with kind of like, okay, this is the life I've created. Am I really happy with this? Like, yeah, I've had a lot of time to kind of just go through and do some mental inventory and say like, okay, I really like all these things, but what in my life have I not been putting attention to? And I notice like what atrophies, and some of those things are actually still really important to me. So I think in any, at any point of life, we should be doing that. But just like a relationship, it shouldn't be your source for everything, for all your love and acceptance and affirmation. Like, it's okay to have a social life. It's okay to have hobbies and space and, work pursuits. Like that whole man concept or that whole human concept is so important that I agree. I think our current cultural, especially, it's very American of us to put work above everything. Mm-hmm. And I don't know that that's the most sustainable given the stats. And you'll notice, like, unfortunately, there's a stat about men that as soon as they retire, unless they have another chapter ahead of them, it's a pretty quick window before they pass on. And I believe that's deeply ingrained in a sense of purpose and needing to have results and an outcome, especially for men in that masculine energy. And I don't know that we've cultivated that balance and finding purpose, in a garden or in other ways of finding that same thing. Mm-hmm. So I think it's so worthwhile to make sure that we have, you said passion pursuits, I'm calling them soul cultivators, like that kind of, that place where you're still, whether it's artistic or, if you like working on cars or whatever, but giving yourself the space to kind of dive into those things on the side and round out your experience as a human.
I like that phrase, soul cultivators. I think I will start using that because I feel like with passion projects, it almost sounds like I'm like, oh, well, that's just a fun hobby that you're doing. But no, I think you're right. I think you are cultivating something that is deep within you that needs to be realized or explored or furthered in a deeper way that's more meaningful. So I like that, soul cultivators. I will start using that. I like that. Means.
Yeah. It's just, Yeah, the word passion, I think, has gotten way overused. In fact, part of my update for the first book is taking out a lot of the word passion and just putting in more descriptive words, because sometimes I used it in places where I was like, oh, I could have been a little more articulate with the idea I'm trying to convey. And I do appreciate that, there has been a little bit of pushback, even on one of my episodes with Whitney English, who she had kind of a predetermined path, but she realized that she was really good at manufacturing, like stationery and paper products. And then she turned that into a very thoughtful daily planner that all of a sudden went gangbusters. And all of a sudden she's like, oh, I didn't necessarily follow my passion, but I followed my strengths. And so that's part of her thing, is like following your strengths. And she was really good at a certain skill set. And I think that's super valid. And I don't think that should be overlooked. But if it were to take away from your sense of self or your sense of fulfillment, I think that's where we still need to create that balance. So maybe that's why, like, if you work the job that gets the bills so you can pay for your family to eat, awesome. Mm-hmm. But then what are you doing to also make sure you have you time? Are you getting to your MMA class? Are you getting to your whatever thing to make sure that you also are feeling, filled up? So I think I've lived a little bit more life since my first book, and I'm grateful that hopefully the next one will reflect that. I also feel the pressure of wanting this book to be so good. So that, stalls me out sometimes, but I'm working through that. And it's interesting to put, just like dancers, our first few videos out there were like, we think we're great, we're out there. And then you look back on it years later, you're like, oh God, like, look at those pigeon toe feet. Like, look at that arm line. But I don't feel that way totally about my first book, but I definitely know, like, this is like my first album, like, I'm going to grow, and it's not going to be like the end all be all. So there are parts of the book where I'm like, oh, you're such a cute 26-year-old writing that. Okay. But, taking it with a grain of salt. Like, I'm really proud that I did it, and I'm really proud that it's out there and it's living out there and it's still helping people. And I still get emails from people every now and then of how it's supporting them in their journey. So that's like the reason, I could have just written it and not put it out there, but I'd rather share it and hopefully, have it support other people. So yeah, it's part of the journey. It's okay to not be good at first, and it's great to grow too.
Yes.